In the quiet town of Riverbend, most days passed slowly. People followed the same routines. Shops opened in the morning and closed before sunset. Neighbors greeted each other with short smiles and polite words. Everyone knew everyone, or at least thought they did. That was why Tom stood out. Tom was a man in his mid-30s who lived a simple life. He worked small jobs when he could find them. Sometimes he fixed fences. Sometimes he cleaned storage rooms. Other times, he helped unload trucks at the old warehouse. His work was honest, but it never paid much. Still, Tom saved every little bit he earned. He rented a small room near the railway tracks. The walls were thin. The roof leaked when it rained. But Tom did not complain. He believed that patience mattered more than comfort. One morning, people noticed something strange. Tom was pulling a wooden cart down the road. On it were old, broken pallets. They were scratched, faded, and uneven. Some still had nails sticking out. Others were cracked from years of use. He stopped near the empty lot at the edge of town and unloaded them carefully. At first, no one understood what he was doing. By the second day, people started watching. By the third day, people started laughing. Tom returned every morning with more pallets. He found them behind closed factories, beside delivery docks, and near trash areas. Most people considered those pallets useless. To them, the wood had no value. To Tom, it was everything. He cleaned each pallet with care. He removed old nails. He washed off dirt and stains. He stacked them neatly, separating strong wood from weak pieces. His hands became rough. His back ached. Still, he worked without stopping. Neighbors gathered near their fences to whisper. One man laughed and said Tom had lost his mind. A woman shook her head and said no house could ever be built that way. Teenagers passing by took pictures and joked loudly. Tom heard it all. He never answered. The empty lot where Tom worked was not beautiful. The soil was dry and uneven. A broken fence leaned toward the road. Weeds grew between rocks. No one had wanted that land for years. That was why Tom could afford it. To him, the land was not empty. It was waiting. Every evening, Tom sat on a wooden crate and studied the pallets. He measured them again and again. He drew simple plans on old paper. He imagined walls, windows, and a roof. He imagined a place where rain would not leak inside. Tom had dreamed of owning a home since he was young. Growing up, he moved from place to place. He learned early that stability was rare. A house, to him, meant safety. It meant peace. People in town did not see that dream. They only saw trash. One afternoon, a group of neighbors walked past the lot. They laughed openly this time. One man asked Tom why he was wasting his life. Another said it would fall apart before it was finished. Tom paused his work. He looked at the wood in his hands. Then he kept going. That silence made some people uncomfortable. It was easier to mock someone who reacted. Tom did not. A week later, heavy rain hit Riverbend. Wind pushed over several pallet stacks. Mud covered the ground. Many neighbors thought this would be the end of Tom's strange project. The next morning, they were surprised. Tom was already there. He lifted each fallen pallet. He cleaned the mud. He rebuilt the stacks stronger and tighter than before. His clothes were soaked. His shoes were covered in dirt. Still, he worked calmly, like he had expected the storm. A few people stopped laughing that day, but not many. As days passed, Tom began laying the base of his structure. He dug shallow trenches by hand. He checked the ground level again and again. He placed thick pallet wood carefully to create a firm foundation. Each step was slow and thoughtful. Children passing by stopped to watch. They were curious now, not just amused. One boy asked Tom what he was building. Tom smiled and said, "A home." The boy looked confused but nodded. At night, Tom returned to his rented room exhausted. He washed his hands and arms. He ate simple meals. Then he sat quietly and reviewed his plans. Sometimes he adjusted measurements. Sometimes he changed ideas. He never rushed. Mocking continued. People said the wood would rot. They said it would never stand straight. They said Tom would regret it. Tom listened and learned. He studied ways to strengthen joints. He treated the wood with natural coatings. He reinforced weak sections. Every mistake taught him something new. Slowly, something began to change. The shape on the land no longer looked like a pile of junk. The baselines were straight. The structure had order. Even from a distance, it no longer looked random. Some neighbors noticed. They did not speak yet, but they watched more closely. Tom did not celebrate. He did not announce progress. He simply kept working. For him, this was not about proving others wrong. It was about proving something to himself. He believed that effort mattered. He believed patience could build things people never expected. He believed that value was not always obvious at first glance. As the sun set one evening, Tom stood back and looked at the wooden frame taking shape. The wind passed through the open structure. Light touched the edges of the pallets. It was still far from finished. But it was standing. And soon, everyone would see what Tom was truly building. As the weeks passed, the wooden structure on the empty lot began to change how people looked at it. What once seemed like a pile of abandoned pallets slowly turned into something with shape and purpose. Still, most people in Riverbend did not believe it would last. Tom arrived at the site every morning before the town fully woke up. The air was cool, and the ground still held moisture from the night. He liked those quiet hours. No voices. No laughter. Just him and the wood. He started building the walls. Each pallet was taken apart and rebuilt into stronger sections. Tom placed them carefully, making sure every piece was firm. He checked levels again and again. When something looked wrong, he fixed it instead of ignoring it. This slow method confused people. Some said he worked too carefully. Others said he was wasting time. But Tom had learned long ago that rushing only created problems later. One afternoon, a man named Paul, who lived across the road, stopped near the fence. Paul had mocked Tom from the start. He folded his arms and watched silently. After a long moment, Paul said, "That looks straighter than I expected." Tom nodded but did not respond. Paul walked away without another word. It was a small moment, but it mattered. As the walls grew taller, Tom faced new problems. Some pallets were weaker than others. Some would bend under pressure. When this happened, Tom adjusted his plan. He reinforced weak areas and reused stronger pieces where needed. At night, he read old building books borrowed from the town library. He learned about airflow, spacing, and support. He practiced what he learned the next day. People passing by began to slow their steps. They no longer laughed loudly. Instead, they stared quietly. One woman whispered to her friend that the house looked solid. Another said it reminded her of something she saw in a magazine once. Tom overheard these comments while working. He felt a small sense of relief but stayed focused. Praise could be just as distracting as mockery. Then trouble came. One morning, Tom arrived to find several pallets missing. The neat stacks he had prepared were partly gone. His chest tightened. He searched the area but found nothing. Someone had taken them during the night. For a moment, Tom stood still. The loss hurt. Each pallet represented hours of work. But instead of anger, he felt determination. That same day, he went farther than usual to find replacements. He pulled heavier loads. His hands burned from effort. When the sun went down, he returned with new wood and rebuilt what was lost. The next morning, the missing pallets were returned. They were placed near the fence. No note. No explanation. Tom understood. Someone had changed their mind. As the walls reached shoulder height, Tom began planning the roof. This part worried many people. A roof made from pallets sounded impossible to them. Tom knew it would be the hardest part. He built supports first. Thick beams reinforced the frame. He tested weight carefully. He climbed up and down, checking every joint. One afternoon, dark clouds gathered quickly. Wind picked up without warning. Dust filled the air. People rushed indoors. Tom stayed. Rain came down hard. The structure creaked under the wind. Tom held onto a beam and waited. His heart pounded, but he trusted his work. When the storm passed, the house was still standing. Not a single wall had shifted. That night, talk spread through Riverbend. People said the pallet house survived the storm. Some sounded surprised. Others sounded impressed. The next day, a small crowd gathered near the lot. No one crossed the fence. They just watched. Tom worked as usual. A woman named Lena stepped forward. She lived nearby and had children. She asked Tom how long he had planned the house. Tom answered honestly. He said he had been planning it for years. Lena nodded slowly and said, "It shows." That simple sentence stayed with Tom. As days turned into weeks, the roof frame took shape. Sunlight filtered through wooden gaps. Shadows moved across the ground inside. The space began to feel like a real home. Tom added window openings. He placed them where light would enter gently. He thought about mornings. He thought about evenings. People began imagining too. Children started asking questions. Older neighbors shared stories of building homes long ago. Someone even brought Tom cold water on a hot afternoon. The mocking stopped. Curiosity replaced it. One evening, Tom sat on a crate and looked at the structure. His muscles ached. His clothes were worn. But his eyes were calm. He remembered the laughter from the beginning. He remembered the doubt. Now, those sounds were gone. The pallet house was no longer a joke. It was becoming something real. And the town of Riverbend was starting to understand that they had judged too quickly. The real surprise was still ahead. By the time the roof frame was complete, the pallet house had become the most talked about place in Riverbend. People who once laughed now slowed down just to look. Some stood across the road pretending to check their phones while watching the structure closely. Tom noticed the change. He did not smile about it. He simply kept working. Inside the house, the space felt different now. The walls stood firm. The roof frame cast long shadows during the afternoon. When Tom stepped inside, the sounds of the town faded. The wooden structure blocked the wind, creating a calm silence. That silence mattered to him. Tom began working on the inside. He smoothed rough wood with hand tools. He filled gaps carefully. He treated the pallets so they would last longer. Each step was done with patience. People assumed the inside would be ugly. They were wrong. The wood showed patterns and lines formed by years of use. When cleaned and treated, it had character. Light entered through the window openings and rested gently on the walls. One afternoon, Paul returned. This time, he did not cross his arms. He stood quietly and said, "I did not think it would look like this." Tom nodded. Paul asked if the house would be warm during winter. Tom explained how he layered the walls and blocked airflow. He showed how the structure held heat. Paul listened carefully. He left without laughing. As Tom continued, he faced another challenge. The floor needed to be strong and smooth. Pallet wood could easily feel uneven. Tom took extra time here. He sanded each board. He tested weight again and again. His knees ached. His hands were sore. Still, he worked. One evening, a group of teenagers approached the fence. Months ago, they were the loudest mockers. Now they watched silently. One of them asked if they could help. Tom paused. He thought carefully. Then he said yes. He showed them how to carry wood properly. He taught them how to measure and place boards. They listened closely. Their laughter faded into focus. Word spread fast. The next day, 2 more people came to help. Then 3. They did not stay long. They helped for an hour or 2. That was enough. Tom never asked for help, but he accepted it with respect. The house began to feel like a shared project, even though Tom remained the heart of it. As the interior took shape, Tom added simple shelves and seating areas. Everything was built from leftover pallet wood. Nothing was wasted. People were surprised by how warm the space felt. One afternoon, Lena visited again. She stepped inside carefully and looked around. She touched the walls and smiled. "It feels safe," she said. That word meant more to Tom than praise. Then came the test everyone feared. Late one night, strong winds returned. This time, they were louder and longer. Rain fell in heavy sheets. The town lost power for several hours. People worried about the pallet house. The next morning, neighbors gathered near the lot. The house was still standing. Not only that, but it showed no damage. Inside, everything was dry. That morning changed something. The town no longer doubted Tom's work. They respected it. A local reporter visited Riverbend. She heard about the pallet house and wanted to see it. She asked Tom questions. She took notes. She took photos. Tom answered honestly. He said the house was built with patience and care. He said the materials mattered less than the effort. The article came out a week later. People from nearby towns began visiting. Some asked questions. Some took pictures. Some just stood quietly. Tom stayed focused. He began adding the final details. He installed simple doors. He sealed windows. He adjusted small things most people would not notice. At sunset, the house glowed softly. The wood reflected warm colors. It no longer looked like pallets. It looked like a home. Tom stood outside one evening and watched people pass by. He saw respect in their eyes. He saw curiosity. He saw inspiration. He remembered the early days. The laughter. The doubt. The loneliness. Now, the same people nodded at him. Some smiled. Some thanked him. But Tom knew the story was not finished. There was one more moment that would change how everyone saw him. The final part was coming. The pallet house now stood quietly at the edge of Riverbend, strong and complete in its main form. From the road, it no longer looked strange. It looked thoughtful. The lines were clean. The wood was smooth and warm in color. People passing by slowed down without realizing it. Tom noticed something new. People no longer laughed. They paused. Inside the house, Tom worked on the final details. He believed these small parts mattered just as much as the walls and roof. A home was not only about standing strong. It was about feeling right. He adjusted the way light entered the rooms. He placed simple curtains made from recycled cloth. When sunlight passed through, the space felt calm. He tested airflow by opening and closing windows at different times of day. Tom spent long hours inside, listening to the sound of the wood. Every creak taught him something. Every quiet moment told him the structure was settling properly. One morning, Paul returned again. This time, he brought a small toolkit. He stood near the door and waited. Tom looked up, surprised. Paul said he wanted to help with the last steps. He admitted he had been wrong from the beginning. His voice was steady, not embarrassed, just honest. Tom nodded and welcomed him inside. They worked together quietly. Paul fixed small hinges. Tom adjusted shelves. Neither talked much. They did not need to. That same week, more neighbors offered help. Some brought leftover paint. Some brought old chairs they no longer used. Others brought warm food during long workdays. Tom accepted only what he truly needed. He did not want the house to become something it was not. The pallet house was still simple. That was its strength. As the interior came together, people began to understand something important. This house was not built to impress. It was built with purpose. Children asked if they could come inside. Tom allowed them, one at a time, under supervision. They walked carefully. They touched the walls. They smiled. Parents watched quietly from outside. One afternoon, Lena visited again with her children. She stood inside and looked around slowly. She noticed the details others missed. The way the floor felt warm underfoot. The way the space felt open but safe. She told Tom that the house felt peaceful. That word spread. Peaceful. The reporter returned with new questions. She wanted to know why Tom never defended himself during the mocking days. She asked how it felt to see people change their minds. Tom answered simply. He said he was too busy building to argue. That sentence appeared in the next article. It reached people far beyond Riverbend. Soon, visitors came not to laugh or doubt, but to learn. Some asked about building methods. Some asked about patience. Some asked about courage. Tom answered everyone kindly, but briefly. He was focused on one last thing. The finishing touch. Behind the house, Tom had been quietly working on a small garden space. He used leftover wood to build raised beds. He filled them with soil. He planted simple plants. This was not for attention. This was for balance. The day the garden took shape, something shifted inside Tom. He stood back and looked at everything he had built. The house. The space. The quiet strength of it all. It felt complete. That evening, Tom invited a few neighbors inside for the first time. Not many. Just a small group. Paul. Lena. 2 others who had helped quietly over the weeks. They stepped inside slowly. No one spoke at first. They looked at the walls, the floor, the shelves, the windows. They felt the warmth. They noticed how solid everything felt. One neighbor said softly that it did not feel like recycled wood at all. It felt like care. That night, as people left, they thanked Tom. Some shook his hand. Some nodded with respect. Tom closed the door and stood alone inside his home. For the first time, he sat down without planning the next task. Silence filled the space. Not an empty silence. A peaceful one. Outside, Riverbend felt different. People talked about effort. About patience. About not judging too quickly. The pallet house had become more than a building. It had become a lesson. But there was still one thing left. The moment when everyone would fully understand what Tom had built and why it mattered so much. That moment was coming soon. The morning Tom moved into the pallet house was quiet and clear. The sky held a soft blue color, and the air felt calm. Birds rested on the fence near the road, watching as Tom carried a small box inside. He did not have many belongings. A few clothes. Some tools. A notebook with old plans. That was enough. Tom placed each item carefully, like he had done with every piece of wood during the build. When he finished, he stood in the center of the house and looked around. Light entered through the windows just as he had planned. The floor felt steady beneath his feet. This was his home. Word spread quickly that Tom had moved in. People passed by slowly, trying not to stare. Some smiled. Some nodded. A few stopped to talk. No one laughed anymore. That afternoon, the town council announced a small gathering near the community center. They wanted to talk about local projects and ideas. Tom did not plan to attend, but Lena stopped by and invited him. She said people wanted to hear from him. Tom hesitated, then agreed. When he arrived, the room was full. Faces turned toward him. Some people he recognized. Others he did not. A few months ago, many of these same faces had mocked him. Now they waited quietly. The council leader thanked Tom for coming and asked him to speak about his house. Tom stood slowly. He did not give a long speech. He said he built the house because he wanted stability. He said he used pallets because they were available. He said patience mattered more than materials. Then he stopped. The room remained silent. A man stood up and said he had judged Tom too quickly. A woman said the house had changed how she saw waste. Another said it reminded him not to underestimate effort. Tom listened quietly. He did not argue. He did not correct anyone. He simply accepted the moment. After the gathering, people followed Tom back to the house. They wanted to see it again, now knowing the full story. Tom opened the door and welcomed them inside in small groups. Inside, people moved slowly. They noticed details they had missed before. The way shelves fit perfectly. The way light rested on the walls. The quiet strength of the structure. Someone asked Tom if he planned to build more houses. Tom smiled gently and said he would help others if they asked. That answer stayed with the town. Over the next weeks, Riverbend began to change in small ways. People reused materials more carefully. They fixed things instead of throwing them away. Neighbors helped neighbors. Tom returned to his routine. He worked small jobs. He tended his garden. He rested inside his home each night. One evening, a storm returned to Riverbend. Rain fell heavily. Wind pressed against buildings. People worried again. Tom stayed inside, calm. The house did not shake. It held. The next morning, neighbors walked past the house with relief in their eyes. The pallet house stood exactly as it always had. Strong. That day, a family from a nearby town visited. They had read about Tom. They wanted advice. They wanted hope. Tom walked them through the house. He explained what he had learned. He spoke honestly about mistakes and patience. They thanked him and left inspired. As seasons changed, the pallet house became a quiet landmark. Not because it was strange, but because it represented something deeper. People remembered how they once laughed. They remembered how wrong they were. One evening, Tom sat on his small porch and watched the sunset. The wood around him glowed softly. The garden behind the house rested peacefully. Paul walked by and stopped. He thanked Tom for changing his mind about many things. Tom nodded. When night fell, Tom went inside and closed the door. He sat at the small table he had built and opened his notebook. He wrote a single sentence. Effort builds more than houses. He closed the notebook and looked around. The pallet house was never just about wood. It was about belief. It was about patience. It was about proving that value is not decided by first impressions. Everyone in Riverbend had learned that lesson. And it started with a man who refused to stop building.